Hello and welcome back to another Royal Reviewer channel episode, and today I'm going to be talking about an article that I've seen. So I'm going to be using the article as a reference point and then using my own knowledge about the royal family to discuss it and talk about basically what is going to be, I think, the future of the royal family. So this is something that I kind of really want to get stuck into. So without further ado, let's get straight into the article. So basically, William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, are advertising for a CEO to oversee their operations. Now, of course, there has been a massive shift for William and Catherine over the past 12 months, with William's father ascending the throne, being King Charles III. Everything has kind of shifted up, and William has very much taken charge of his own destiny. He is now the Duke of Cornwall as well. And of course, if you didn't know, the Duchy of Cornwall is a vast kind of body of lands and property, which gives an income for the heir to the throne. Um, Prince Charles, when he was Prince Charles, had this, and it generated all of his income, which doesn't just provide income for him personally, for his personal spending money, but it actually pays for the running of his household. So all of the royal engagements that he and Camilla, William, Catherine, and when Harry and Meghan were working members of the royal family for a certain time, it also covered their working operations as well. So in due course, when the Prince and Princess of Wales's children are of age and are perhaps taking or undergoing royal duties, that money will pay for their operations as well. Travel, clothes, whatever, the staff, whatever it might be. So it's not just personal spending money, it does actually cover the part of the operation of the monarchy. The other royals come under the King and Buckingham Palace. So traditionally, things were run, I suppose, a little bit separately. So under Charles, for example, he didn't have a CEO when he was Duke of Cornwall, but he had, palace courtiers that were high up that would run, for example, the Duchy of Cornwall as a whole enterprise. Then he would have people that, for example, would run his charitable operations like the Prince's Trust, whatever else there might be that he was involved in. So this is a big, big, big departure. So if I start reading, and then I'll kind of stop and dissect things as we go on. So it says, as job advertisements go, it's an eye-opener. Applicants should be experienced, boast an impressive track record, and brim with emotional intelligence. Now that's quite telling straight away. So they want someone, I think, that is going to have an eye to kind of the social climate that we are going through right now. And don't forget, William and Catherine had what can be called a very difficult Royal Caribbean tour. And I think there needs to be, when it comes to planning, not just their royal tours, but also a lot of their ventures, and also running the Duchy of Cornwall, there needs to be an eye to kind of this new social climate. But they should also be low on ego. They don't want someone who is, I think, a career person that's moving up in the royal ranks that, wants these kind of fancy titles. So I think they want someone that's going to just get on with the job and not try and compete for glory. Able to operate as a servant leader. That's that's a good one. Who prioritizes staff and the greater good. So they want someone who's going to be a big picture thinker, that's going to be looking after the greater good, not just of William and Catherine, but I think of the monarchy in general, and reflect values of humility, duty, service, empathy, and compassion. There's a few family members that could do with taking note of that job application. I'm not saying any more. It's a formidable wish list. Well, it is indeed. I do think. But they are determined to fill as they hire their first chief executive officer. They have even employed a top global leadership services agency, Odgers and Berndsen. I've never heard of them before, to find the candidate for a hefty commission, no doubt. Apparently, they usually charge a third of the first year's salary as a finder's fee, and apparently the salary is expected to be more than, for example, the top courtiers, which I'm sure will ruffle a few feathers. It's almost impossible to convey just how revolutionary William and Kate's decision to bring in a real-world executive to oversee their Kensington Palace household is. Yes, it's a complete and utter departure. They normally have sort of Lord Chamberlains and Masters of the House. So this is a complete departure. And I think it's pertaining to where they're going to be. They're going to have sort of one person that links the different organizations and aspects of their life together in one so that it is seamless and probably more cost effective as well. I imagine there could be potentially less staff involved if things work together because you don't have to have duplicates. So in turn, it will save money as well. So royal households, as I've just said, are operations where traditionally senior executives boast historic titles such as Lord Chamberlain, which is effectively kind of like a Buckingham Palace CEO, and Master of the Household. Most existing ones have spent decades navigating the hierarchy of the royal household, or entered from the Whitehall, so civil service, or military background, which I suppose has served the royal family well in the past. You know, people from that background do genuinely have service and duty, and they do have kind of structure in their life, especially coming from the military. So apparently there is an internal joke, albeit tongue-in-cheek, that the palace still operates using Windows 1066. In other words, a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit outdated. So an inspiring internal champion who is able to flex, as the job description reads, is going to be either a breath of fresh air or an icy blast of wokery, depending on how you are minded to interpret it. I interpret it as they want to go with the flow, and they know that to go against the flow isn't going to work for them. They need to embrace some of these social changes. And of course, Her Late Majesty sort of kept up, but was never, I suppose, in front. They never kind of instigated things. They always kind of kept up, but didn't necessarily instigate these changes. And I think this is William exerting his new found freedom in his autonomy to be able to do these things. And it kind of leads me to think with Harry and Meghan how they kind of, I suppose, wanted to change the monarchy, and then they kind of left, I suppose, because partly left because they couldn't do that. They couldn't see a route to kind of making those changes. It was always going to come in due course. It was just a matter of time. And of course, now, you know, King Charles is making his own changes to Buckingham Palace and the way things are done. But likewise, William and Catherine are making their own changes. So these changes happen naturally if you kind of wait long enough. And the thing is, Harry and Meghan didn't have to wait that long. As it turns out. So there are changes afoot coming. But in truth, that's not remotely fair, as King Charles, as I've said, has already embarked on a programme of modernisation, while juggling the sometimes unwieldy requirements that comes with being a working head of state. Yes, you have to have an eye to the traditions of the past whilst looking to the visions of the new, which is kind of what I said in my last year's Christmas message about continuity. So if you haven't seen that, go and check that out, because I kind of talk about these things. How fortuitous of me. So the Queen, as in Queen Camilla, has dispensed with ladies in waiting. Well, she's kind of replaced them with her companions. So it's kind of the same thing, but not quite. So it's these kind of small modernizations, the changing of words. I mean, never before have the power of words been important, and that's what we're kind of seeing now. So the King has appointed the palace's first director of community engagement, of course, to champion marginalised areas, which is basically an extension of kind of what he did with the Prince's Trust. That's what the Prince's Trust was about. It was to help young people from marginalised areas of society. So it's no surprise or shock to me that he's bringing that into the palace. There are also plans to axe 1 in 5 middle managers, of course, cost saving. But these changes, while quietly revolutionary in their own way, are perhaps not so noticeable to the naked eye. William and Catherine, by contrast, make clear their determination to change the status quo. What William and Catherine are doing is quite visible, I should say. And like I said, I think it will ruffle a few feathers. So this week's revelation that they are advertising externally for a CEO has been seen as them setting out their stall for the future, turning what's been affectionately dubbed the firm, as in small lowercase, into the firm with capital letters, Royalty PLC. Things have got to be run differently to survive in the modern world, and everything is a business. Schools are run as a business. The job centre for employment is run as a business. Everything is run as a business these days, for cost effectiveness, for being streamlined, for having impact and output. So it makes perfect sense that that is done to the modern royal family, such as in Queen Victoria's day. Queen Victoria, and especially Prince Albert, revolutionised the monarchy. At that time, in the Victorian era, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, helped to transform the royal household under Queen Elizabeth, and things are changing again. And it makes perfect sense that things are updated when there has been a change of monarch. One source, this is interesting, who has worked within the palace, says it's a smart move, although one hard to align with the existing setup of Buckingham Palace, where many live for hierarchy and titles. That's what I was saying. It's all about the glory, all about the pomp, all about the circumstance, career members of the royal household, basically. So it's hard to imagine how William and Catherine's kind of setup is going to work and interact with that of the king. I imagine that the CEO is going to be that kind of stepping stone, that communication flow between William and Catherine's operations and that of the palace, which I think again is going to ruffle a few feathers with courtiers. They continue, having a CEO that oversees all the various extensions in their world, the Duchy of Cornwall, the Royal Foundation, the Earthshot Awards, and the Princess's Centre for Early Childhood, seems a good move to me. Modernising their organisational and operational structures is sensible as long as it means bringing in people from the outside with real world experiences as opposed to career courtiers. That's what I was saying. You've got to have the right people, and that's why they're putting it out there. Um, I mean, I'm still not sure. I mean, they'll still be looking, I think, from the corporate world. I mean, these organisations, are still going to be sourcing from, I suppose, big corporate organisations. Makes me think, would actually this sort of job be better? Almost like somebody. I mean, possibly someone even plucked from the street could possibly do a really good job. That is real world. So I still think hiring at kind of, CEO, company, leader level is still kind of perhaps a little bit removed from real world. So it's going to be very interesting to see who they go with. Therein lies the rub. If you are looking to book the system, you are inevitably also challenging it to a certain extent, which made me think, obviously, about Harry and Meghan, the way that they wanted to kind of challenge that system. William and Catherine are doing it now that they have the autonomy to do so. I think if Harry and Meghan had just waited a little bit longer, they would have seen those kind of changes that they wanted to see. How will this go down at Buckingham Palace remains to be seen. One well-placed insider remarked dryly, "Oh yes, I've heard about this interesting plan." Ooh, a bit of side-eye. I can sense the side-eye. Suggesting perhaps not everyone is comfortable with the corporatization of the court. Certainly, the move came as a surprise to many. So, a bit of a shock, basically. I don't think this had been discussed or communicated until they read about it in Richard Eden's Thursday column, which suggests family communications still aren't as seamless as they could be. Ooh, okay. So, communication a little bit lacking. Maybe that will improve with the new CEO. Some are even asking whether there is a little giddiness in the Team Wales camp now William has his hand on the tiller of the Duchy of Cornwall, which of course is a £650 million estate that funds the heir to the throne. I don't think there's giddiness. I think that's change. I think that's what change is. I think, he's got to, again, we'll use that analogy, grip that tiller, keep the Duchy of Cornwall steaming forward, but also he's got to try out new things. And that is what he's doing. Some are even asking whether there is I've read that one. This elevation means he no longer has to go cap in hand to Charles for cash or consult him on management decisions. The reason William hasn't done this before is because he hasn't had the autonomy. True, absolutely true. Now William is kind of master of his own destiny in the same way that Prince Charles was. Others insist this move isn't about the Waleses turning their backs on history. I don't think it is, or overturning Charles's legacy. It's about building on it. And I think that is absolutely true. You can't just have things stand still. Charles isn't doing it with the Queen's legacy, and of course, William isn't doing it with Charles's legacy. It's been a massive period of change, and I think William has had to reorganise things incredibly quickly. He and Catherine are certainly thinking strategically about how they want to work in the future, and putting good foundations in place now is really common sense. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Another person added, it's up to each generation of the royal family to take the best of what's gone before while putting their own stamp on things. Absolutely. Queen Elizabeth did it, Charles has done it, and now William is doing it. And in turn, George will do exactly the same, because things socially will be very different when it's George's time to be king than what it is now. So George will have to implement his own changes. So despite all of this, I don't think William and Catherine are looking to expand their operations particularly further. In terms of staffing levels, I think this CEO is going to be over a team of about 60. I don't necessarily think there's going to be a lot of changes in terms of staffing level with the Duchy of Cornwall. That will still need the same kind of amount of staff, maybe a little bit of streamlining. But I think this new CEO is going to be over kind of an oversight team, I suppose, and maybe certain levels of the Duchy of Cornwall, certain levels of the Royal Foundation, certain levels of the Earthshot Prize, and then, of course, that communication will filter down those organisations. I think that's possibly how it's going to work, because you can't just have one person over, every organisation going, and all of their staff as well. That would be a little bit too much, and it would seem on the low side to just have a team of 60. So we'll reserve judgment to see how that's going to work. William and Catherine have always been said to be very hands-on. They'd like to turn up at the office. They allow their staff to bring dogs to work. So I don't think that is going to change. And this new CEO is going to have to fit in with that kind of working culture. William and Catherine like to know their employees by name. And they like to know their partners and all of that, while still maintaining a level of respect. It's always been a very small and tight team. So, like I say, that person has got to very much fit in. The late Queen understood that while it's important to be relatable, there needs to be something about the monarchy that is special, that makes it worth having. I think these steps are not going to go against that. I think we are still going to have that magic. We're still going to have that speciality, that flair that monarchy brings, but it's going to be interpreted in a more modern, fluid way. I think William has become very in step with his own destiny. He's accepted his role. And since becoming the Duke of Cornwall, I think he has stepped up. And I've noticed, I think, in his demeanour, I've commented rather in a fun way about how good he's looking, how he kind of seems like he's growing into his looks. I think that possibly has a lot to do with confidence. I think his confidence is exuding, and that makes him more attractive. Do they have anyone to navigate potentially choppy waters? I think they do. I think they are a good, close-knit team themselves. I'm talking about William and Catherine. And I think we underestimate Catherine. We often see her as the more kind of shy, quiet, English Rose type. But I think she is quite steely behind the scenes. And I think we got little snippets of that come out with all the Harry and Meghan situation. I think Catherine has played quite, I think she's quite shrewd, and I think she is stepping up to being a very, very good queen consort in the making. That is the end of the article and the end of this conversation. I'm very interested to see people's thoughts and comments about this. So please leave a comment in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to share on social media. And of course, do hit that bell so that you know whenever I upload a new video. So from me, to you all, and goodbye.